Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 146 of In a Good Way podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, a Native American author, Edgar Martin del Campo. He shares lessons from from indigenous religions, cultures, and languages from North to South America. With his personal experience, world travel, and academic research, Edgar brings a unique voice to his videos on spirituality and culture. He teaches as both ritual practitioner and amateur anthropologist. Edgar is a descendant of Cora ancestry from Nayarit, Mexico. He speaks English, Spanish, and Nahuatl. So thank you so much, Edgar, for being here. It's an honor.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I found you, not that you were lost or anything, but I came across your page, which is I have the Serpent, right? Or
Mhm.
I have the
Yes.
Serpent. That's right, on YouTube. So he has the channel on YouTube, I have the Serpent. So you could look him up. But I found, I came across your page because I was looking at how to pronounce words in Nahuatl. So I
Mhm.
was like, let me, because sometimes you'll find them on YouTube and they're not doing it right, right? It's like
Mhm.
being slaughtered. So I was like, I need to
Mhm.
find someone that pronounces it correctly.
Mhm.
Um, when I would post things, I couldn't stand saying the words and I knew I was saying them wrong, right? So that's how I
Mhm.
first came
Yeah.
across your page. And I've also seen you, teach about different things. I even looked at your webpage and you've written some pretty amazing because they seem so real, right? Like you had to do it for like a class, right? As far
I,
as
I used to be a professor. Yes.
oh, okay. See,
Mhm.
I didn't know that. Okay. You've said that on your page before?
I haven't really talked much about it on my social media, but for 7 years I was a university professor,
Oh, okay. And what were you teaching in the university?
anthropology and linguistics. So
Wow.
I left academics about in 2013,
Mm.
but I still had a passion for teaching about these subjects, and I had so much material. In fact, the inspiration for the channel and its name both came from when I visited Peru in 2019, and
Mm.
I went to the archaeological site of Cuelap, and this is an exclusive. Nobody else has heard me like publicly divest on this, but when I visited the archaeological site of Cuelap, which was occupied by the Inca in the 15th century, there was a shrine that had a ring of serpent eyes around it. And that was the inspiration. Well, that was part of the inspiration for both beginning the channel, and also the name of the channel was from that trip to the site of Peru back in
Wow.
2019. The Eye of the Serpent Shrine, as it were. And that's what inspired the name of the channel. So
Wow.
I had so much old content that I was no longer using because I have since made the switch to web development and writing apps. That this has now become my career, but I still felt like a drive to continue to teach about the things that I feel are worth discussing, the wisdom and the knowledge from the different native cultures, which has been my specialty for a long time. And I still want to I still travel to different parts of the Americas to continue this work.
Wow. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. And it was funny because when I invited you on here, you happened to mention uh that you were like, "Oh, I could speak about this." And
Yeah.
the place you mentioned, that's where my dad happens to be from, right? He's from Veracruz. And
Mm.
so when you said that, I was like, "Oh, wow," because he didn't really learn as much as well. Well, he knows a lot. Sometimes I think he's just one of those people that you have to ask, and then he'll say,
Mm.
"Oh yeah," you know,
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. So he never volunteers
Mm.
the knowledge, right? He was never
Mm.
someone that volunteered knowledge. So, but it was funny because even where he was from, he said that people used to say, "Oh, de ahí vienen los brujos y las brujas."
Yeah.
I don't know if it
Oh,
was.
yeah,
Go,
like
go, go.
Catemaco.
Well, he was born in Cosamaloapan, right? How do you say
Hmm.
Cosamaloapan?
I believe
But
so. Yeah.
you studied there or about that?
No, that's toward the south end. I'm actually my research and the things that we'll talk about are toward the north end of the states. Veracruz is, and has been and continues to be my favorite state of Mexico, though. I
Wow.
wasn't born there, but I've been there so many times for a number of different subjects, and it's just a continually fascinating place to visit.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah,
only
there's
been there one time, and it
mm,
was to meet like my dad's real mom because see, there's another reason a lot of it was lost was because he was adopted, right? But
mm, yeah,
when I was like in eighth grade, we flew over there. We went to the Teotihuacan, we went over
yeah,
there. Then we
yeah,
went to, I think he had one brother in Puebla, another brother in Cuernavaca, and then his mom was in Veracruz. So we went through that whole
mm,
that whole thing. But I only got to go once, right? But even that, his mom, I believe, said, "Oh, well, he was really born in another town." And I think so. I don't know if
mm,
it was Cosa Maluapa that was the place that they said, "Oh, yeah, that's what they used to say that's where the brujos and the brujas were from," or if it was the other place where his mom said that he
yeah,
was from. So, but
yeah,
anyways, it was funny because that's been my walk, right? And I didn't necessarily choose it. It's like it kind of just unraveled for me, right? The
yeah.
spiritual walk. So it was
Oh
I
yeah.
would have loved to have known more. But I'm
Mm,
just interested in hearing what I guess we could start off with that, like whatever you want to share about your journey with, in Veracruz and what you
mhm,
learned from, I guess, the spiritual aspects, the indigenous aspects, everything like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and from our conversation, we were talking about this. What I think that would be especially timely for the season is the New Year ceremonies that were
Mm,
taking place between the end of January and the kind of toward the first week of February, and that's something that I was thinking a lot about lately. Is the idea of the spirit contact, the spirit pacts that are made during that season.
mm,
But yeah, it's worth kind of giving the audience a little bit of a background on what I was doing there for field work. So I began field work in that region back in 2003, and this was to learn Nahuatl in a literally intensive native setting. I took a coursework in Mexico, and the final week of the trip, it was a 4 week intensive course with native speakers and a professional linguist. And
mm,
so we were learning by actually speaking with and learning to pronounce and to conjugate directly with native speakers from the Huasteca region of northern Veracruz and eastern San Luis Potosi. There are two main dialects of Nahuatl that are spoken in northern Veracruz. And that's a very important lesson for the audience because there is this assumption in popular culture that with the Aztec civilization fell, that was the end of the culture. But that's not necessarily true. We lost the civilization of the city states and the imperial culture of the Mexica and the other large city states of that area. But the people themselves have not disappeared. There's no longer there's controversy whether we could say there's still a surviving Mexica nation, but we can say that the Nahuatl descendants are still very much alive. It's actually the largest Native American language in North America. It's about over 1.5 million speakers of this language that has multiple dialects across southern Mexico. There are variants or dialects of the language that are spoken in Nayarit, where it's called the Mexicanero. It's also spoken in Michoacan, where it's called Nahuatl. It's called it's also spoken in Jalisco, in Guerrero, in the DF, Edomex. So across many parts of Mexico. So I was in the northeast part of the Nahuatl map. I was
mm,
in the Huasteca dialects are there's a western variant that's spoken in eastern San Luis Potosi, and the eastern Huasteca Nahuatl, which is spoken in northern Veracruz. And that's where I
mm.
was doing my field work. So
Wow.
that's where we went after my first encounter, my first visit to a native comunidad or a native village was at the end of this intensive 4-week course. So the final week of that course, we actually went to a village in the region of Chicontepec, and that was where we actually lived with the villagers and got to converse with them. And some of them were monolingual. They knew only the Nahuatl, especially the older abuelitas who had very limited exposure to Spanish. So that was the real test. And I could handle myself pretty well. I actually remember some you can conjugate an entire sentence in just one word. One of my favorite examples is when later on in my field work, when I was living with another host in that area, he and his wife were about to head out and do some business, and left me in charge of closing up after the house. And a word that he told me was Mictlāntēcutli, which is to please close up the house as you leave it. So he said that entire sentence in one word, because Nahuatl is a polysynthetic language. And so it is very easy to combine prefixes and suffixes around a cluster of combining nouns or verbs. And with that, you can express an entire sentence in just a single, very complicated word. That's not the entire language, but it is very much, it is a very important feature of the Nahuatl language. So going back to the point is that the descendants of the Aztecs, the descendants of the Mexica and other Nahuatl-speaking nations continue to exist in different parts of Mexico. And my study was I wanted to understand the evolution of the idea of the Nahuali, or the Nahual. I'm sure you're familiar with this idea, the Nahual as a companion spirit animal. There's a very common belief that goes back to the ancient Maya, the ancient Zapotec, and many other pre-Hispanic civilizations, that every human being has at least one, is born with a spirit or a soul that exists separate from the body, and everybody has at least one. Different cultures will say different kinds of theories about what kind of thing it can exist at and how many a person has. But everybody has at least one companion spirit animal or companion spirit, and it usually exists outside of the body, and it usually exists in the form of an animal. And this was, and we find this with the idea of the Wai among the ancient Maya, for example. And the Mexica and other Aztec cultures certainly had this as well. So my question, I was looking at how this idea has evolved since the Spanish conquest. And I noticed that the imposition of the church brought on its own ideas of people that have a power to communicate with a familiar animal. There's also a very important idea in ancient Mesoamerica about the ability to even, like the most powerful beings, such as gods, shamans, kings, were not only had a deep and profound rapport with their spirit animal, but they could even transform into it. And we have accounts of this from the Aztecs, for example, of kings such as, I think, Nezahualpili was able to transform into a coyote, according to some of the legends. So this was a very prominent belief that the most powerful, the most sacred of beings were not only had a deep connection with their spirit animal, but could even physically transform it to one. And when the Spanish brought Christianity over, they also brought in medieval concepts of witchcraft, where they saw that witches in the medieval times were also believed to do this. They had a deep connection with a familiar spirit animal. They could transform into animals. They could fly long distances. But however, this power was diabolical. It came from willfully selling your soul to the devil. It was renouncing the sacred. Whereas in the Native American world, it was embracing the sacred. So there was this
Mm,
conflict of ideologies, and this was what I was trying to understand was how did if you especially in central Mexico, if in Veracruz, for example, or in the DF, often when people talk about the ability to transform into animals, it's like they're vampires. They prey on children.
mm,
They curse. They do all sorts of horrible things. And my question was my dissertation question was asking how did this idea become so evil?
mm,
And it was and the a follow up to that question was has this have we moved past this yet? Has this is this still are these terms and are these ideas still undergoing transformation? So I wanted to look at the nature of language itself. How do these native words evolve? What is it about the vocabulary that allows them to undergo such profound shifts in meaning? And that was something that I was looking to test my hypothesis on by living in these native communities. So I
mm,
had to learn to speak the Nahuatl language in order to understand what was happening to it, especially with these supernatural terms such that we find from the folklore. So it was both a linguistic study, but it was also a cultural study. I was looking at how people use language in their situations. And I found some very interesting. I came across some very interesting insights. For example, the variety of meanings for the tonali, the a person's shadow soul that
mm,
was that even gods and spirits could possess. Like for example, there was a harvest ceremony that there were harvest ceremonies that I participated in the end of September, beginning of October of 2004, and part of the ceremony was creating this large circular stack of ears of corn that would eventually be distributed to all the guests. But while it was still formed in the stack, one of the ritual musicians pointed to the stack with his with his violin bow, and he told me this is the tonal, the spirit companion or the spirit essence of the maize god Tikomeshotit, which means
mm,
seven flower. So that was that this was a spirit who still has a name that came from the ancient ritual Aztec calendar. That conjunction of 260 days from the combinations of the 13 numerics and the 20 calendar signs, which was kind of like a zodiac, with the different signs having different qualities and features, as did the numbers. So the seven flower or Tikome Shotit still kept its name from that these old beliefs about the calendar. So the violinist, the musician, was explaining to me that this was the presence of the spirit of the corn god who was with us in the room, and I just that was just like this wake up moment for me that he was here all along, and that
mm,
so I got to learn about how the modern indigenous peoples understand the spirituality and how they talk about these spiritual concepts through the Huasteca dialect that they still speak today. So that is the background for how I was doing my research in this area. Living in these comunidades, these communities, these villages for months at a time. My main field work took about 8 months from between August of 2004 to May of 2005. That was when I did most of my field work in that part of Veracruz. But along the way, I also began to visit the Otomi, who are a
mm,
neighboring Nahua, or their native community that have inhabited the Huasteca as well, kind of like the southernmost end of the Huasteca region of North Veracruz. So the Huasteca is a lowland, very subtropical region in the kind of the northern Gulf Coast. So this is like say southern Tamaulipas, so in, Tampico is one of the northernmost parts of the Huasteca of Tamaulipas. It includes eastern San Luis Potosí and northern Veracruz, northern Hidalgo, and some would even say we could include the northernmost tip of Puebla, kind of like that part just north of the Sierra of Puebla, and also the northeast corner of Querétaro. So there are 6 states that the Huasteca lowland area encompasses. And this is, there are many cultural features that this region shares across this area. One of the most famous is the huapango, the string instrument trios of that area, which is has become one of my favorite musical genres in Mexico, especially the way, the quality of the sound that I heard when I was in Veracruz. Another important feature that's found in this area are these paper figurines, and I'll talk about these later. They were cut from sheets of paper, and they represent different spiritual figures, such as the fire, the water, the mountains, the earth, and different phenomena that are central to the native spirituality of this area. This tradition is especially found among the Tepehuah, the Otomi, and the Nahua people of this part of the Huasteca. So they're called muñequitos, but in their own languages, they have different names. In Otomi, for example, they're called the heki, but in Nahuatl, they're called Tlatekli. And Tlatekli comes from the word teki, which means to be cut or to cut. So they are paper cuttings that look like little dolls, and they're usually about 7 inches by 2.5 tall and 2.5 inches wide. And these are also going to be very important for talking about the spirit pacts. They are a very important part of the traditional native practices found across not just the Nahua, but also some of the other neighboring communities. The Otomi have this kind of legendary reputation as the keepers of the knowledge of the sacred. In the area where I was doing my research, I was learning over and over again. There was like common knowledge that the most powerful curanderos, brujos, the shamans, were coming from the Otomi, especially this one comunidad called Cruz Blanca, which really got my attention because I actually got to meet an old man. There was a funny old man who would travel among various villages, even among the Nahua. He knew some Nahuatl, but he really he needed to speak Spanish as a lingua franca because he knew Otomi and Spanish. Many of the villagers that he visited knew Nahuatl and Spanish, so he would just have to rely on Spanish in order to converse with many of them. There are some trilingual speakers. There are, and I heard that there was at least one curandero who spoke Spanish, Nahuatl, Otomi, and I believe his fourth language was Tepehuah. So there are some who are very who are very skilled polyglots, but they were exceptional rather than the rule. And I got to watch the old man perform a lot of these ceremonies, such as cutting the paper figurines, offering the prayers, doing the chicken sacrifices, which I'm also going to talk about a little later on. And I was so intrigued that it prompted my decision to actually go to Cruz Blanca and kind of go to the source and learn what that was about. And I began my first visit to Cruz Blanca was back in, I think it was March of 2005. So we're coming up on almost 20 years since my first visit to Cruz Blanca, and I still go. Even though my formal fieldwork has ended, I continue to visit. I visited in 2006, 2008, 2009, I think, a New Year's ceremony that I visited, that I attended in 2012. More recently, I visited Cruz Blanca to film their observances of the Carnaval season, the Ash Wednesday season, which is a very important native ritual cycle. which I talk about. I have a whole playlist on my channel about that visit in 2018 when I was visiting the area to understand the native spirituality that's still guiding. That something that on the surface looks like a Catholic holiday, but is still which is being performed in the spirit of the Ash Wednesday week and the idea of carnival. But a lot of their mythology and their beliefs are still underlyingly native. And that was a very important, that was a point I was making in this playlist series. My last visit was in 2019, and that was for the Xantolo, the Days of the Dead, and the Todos Santos holidays. So I am still in contact with many of the people, some of which I met when they were children, and now, and in the past 20 years, they've now become parents. So I've gotten to watch them grow up and create their own families since the time when they themselves were growing up in their families in Veracruz. So I still have connections with some of the Otomi in the region of Cruz Blanca, and that still remains a very important part of my research, is understanding the interchange of ideas, especially between the Nahua and the Otomi of the Huasteca region of Veracruz. The New Year ceremonies that I'd like to talk about, that I'm going to talk about further today, are also recognized as originating from the Otomi. So when I got to witness one of these New Year's ceremonies in 2005, it was the third week of January 2005, when I was living in the comunidad among the Nahua. There were two officiating specialists. They were both curanderos. These are ritual healers. One of them from the Nahua villages, and the other one was the old man from Cruz Blanca. And because Cruz Blanca is seen as the originator of many of these costumbre, these native custom traditions, one of the first things that the Nahua curandero did before beginning any other part of the ceremonial cycle, they sat together, two seats facing each other in front of an altar. And the Nahua asked the Otomi for permission to use his rituals in order to initialize the New Year ceremonies for the community. So this was an acknowledgement of the Otomi origins of these customs and asking for permission to use them and to practice them for the village. And this is a New Year's tradition that I observed twice when in my visits to Veracruz. They were both like kind of the second or the third week of January. So like right around the middle of January is when this tradition, when this ceremony is practiced. And the Nahua call it mo yanquilia. Yanqui is the root verb, and that is to become new. So the whole word has the sense of renewal. It is the renewal of the year, but importantly, it's the renewal of the agricultural cycle of the for the communities. And this is a petition to bring the first rains for the sowing season, because because in a couple of weeks they would begin to start sowing their milpa gardens, where they grow maize and other important crops. But maize is the most important. It is an essential, it is a foundation of the Mesoamerican cultures, is a reliance and cultivation of maize for their subsistence. And so this is a very sacred matter, and this is initialized with a week-long New Year ceremonial tradition that is petitioning the spirits, such as the spirits of the mountain, the maize, the sun, the fire, the earth, and so on, to be welcomed and fed so that they are nourished, and there is a kind of the setting up of a contract, the setting up of a pact between the human and the spirit worlds, and it is formally signed with the blood of a sacrificial chicken. So that is the context for what I wanted to wanted to talk about concerning the spirit pacts that are made around this time of the year. Today is February 15th, 2025. So I'm reflecting on events that happen that would be happening now, like around this time, the conclusion of the New Year ceremonies and the beginning of the first sowing, and even these sowing events have a ceremonial aspect to them. So when they go out to the milpa fields and they are taking their digging sticks and they're planting in little bunches of the maize kernels into each of the into the holes, there is they set up a small cross at one corner of the milpa field, and they will pour, say, a glass of like a little cup, a little plastic cup, and into it they will pour something like a soda or coffee or hot or chocolate, and then a little Maria cookie, like a galleta, on top of it. So this is just like a small offering to the spirits or to of the owners of the land, so that they to remind them that we still want to be friends. We still want this reciprocal relationship where the human community offers food to the spirit world. The spirit world is nourished through these offerings, and in turn, because they are healthy and robust, they will provide ample agriculture. They will provide the healthy livestock and maize and other foods that are raised throughout the agricultural season. So this is so, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos and interviews, and I definitely want to share this for our audience here. There are three fundamental principles that are of Mesoamerican religion that are at play here. The first of these is the universe is alive, that it is populated with spiritual and sacred beings that guide and give life to the things of the cosmos, the mountains, the land, the sun, the moon, the corn, the winds. These are all living entities. And as such, they also have life cycles. They also require sustenance, just like all other living things on the earth. And that leads to the second important point, and that is that the universe is reciprocal. So just as humans and animals must be fed, plants must be nourished in order to continue to survive, so too is the spirit world, that they too must be nourished. And so this is the foundation behind sacrifice, is this circulation, the circuit of energy, the living life force that is circulated between the human and the spirit worlds. This is the foundation to the Mesoamerican concepts of sacrifice. Even so, this idea persists today. We don't do it with humans anymore, and I know that's very controversial. But the idea persists, and we see this in their explanations for sacrificing livestock animals, game animals, such as chickens, turkeys, and pigs. And this was something that I observed in the New Year ceremonies among both the Aztec or the Nahua and the Otomi. That's the second guiding principle. The third is that the universe is reciprocal, that the universe is dual. There is a fundamental duality to the cosmos. That is not a binary that we find in Western cultures, but rather these are more like spectra of opposing yet complementary forces, such as the cyclicity of day and night, of light and darkness, of warmth and cold. the life and death, and even male and female. So these are some of the primary dualities that shape the ways in which natural phenomena exist. So the universe is alive, it is reciprocal, and it is dual. And all three of these principles converge in these New Year ceremonies. So, for example, the corn spirits that are venerated during this time, and they are given off. The corn is a living, sentient, spiritual being, or at least is governed by one, and it requires offerings of soda and candy and cookies and hot chocolate and chicken blood. So that reciprocity of Mesoamerican ritual is the second principle that we find that they're in the New Year ceremonies as well. And the third one, the duality, we see, for example, with the presentation of these maize figurines that are dressed up. They are like the paper figurines that I was talking about earlier, but they're even taller. They're at least 9 inches tall. And they're in this kind of like papel de lustre, they're kind of like glossy colored paper in different colors. And they are dressed up as either male or female. So the female ones will have like little necklaces, little shoes, little dresses. The male ones will have a little sombrerito, say a guayabero shirt. So they are presented as a complement, as pairs of male and female aspects of the corn spirit. So here, ultimately, we see those three principles all operating within this setting of the New Year's Moyanquillia ceremony. So we see, for example, the duality, the reciprocity, and the animacy of the universe all coming into play in the beliefs that are shaping how these rituals are performed during the New Year ceremonies.
Oh, wow. And just because you brought up corn, I wanted to ask you, is there a similar belief? Because I know the Popol Vuh is more like Mayans from, I guess, Guatemala. Is that where it's
Yes,
more centered around?
yes,
So, like in the
yes,
Popol Vuh, for example, how it literally says that the gods created humans from corn. So,
yes.
is there a similar belief from what you learned in the specific culture that you were studying?
I will give you, well, there's actually, not in my area, not in my field, but there's a famous book by the anthropologist Alan Sandstrom called Corn is Our Blood.
Mm.
So right there in the title, there is an acknowledgement that the corn is a component. It is a building block to the human body. This book is about the Nahua of the southern Huasteca, very close to where I was doing my research. The community in his book is called Puyecaco, and this is in the municipio of Ixhuatlán de Madero, which is where Cruz Blanca is. So Puyecaco is kind of in the area, in the Nahua-speaking community between where I was doing my fieldwork in Chicontepec and the Otomi of Cruz Blanca in Ixhuatlán de Madero. So right in this very area where I was doing my work, we have examples of this principle. It's exactly what you were saying, like the idea that the maize is our subsistence. It is so as I say in my prayers, corn is our subsistence, corn is our substance, corn is our body, corn is our body, corn is our blood. And this definitely, I can definitely see the connections with the Popol Vuh. And to kind of follow up on your question, there is an archaeological site called Cacaxtla that prevailed. I think it was kind of between the 900 to 1100, or between 800 and 1100 AD. So they were contemporary with the Toltec. Like the height of the Cacaxtla was contemporary with the Toltec, and also the fall of Teotihuacan, the pyramids. And in fact, there is a mural that was discovered in Cacaxtla that shows a burning pyramid. So there is this could be evidence that the Cacaxtla may have been part of a movement that took down the pyramids and contributed to the fall of Teotihuacan. But
Mm.
Cacasla is kind of like Pompeii of ancient Italy, in the sense that because of a volcanic explosion, because of a fill from an eruption, the ash preserved the murals of this ancient city and the temples. And we have these vibrant paintings of priests and mythical scenes that have been that were preserved on the walls in bright blue, red, orange, green, black. It's spectacular.
Wow.
And in fact, many of these murals have Mayan influences. For example, there is a priest who is painted in black, and his profile, his decoration, his priestly decorations, the black paint on the skin, these are all Maya.
Mm.
So Cacasla is in Tlaxcala, not far, so just north of Puebla. This is central Mexico, yet there is this pronounced Maya influence. But one of the murals in Cacasla is a stalk of corn, and the little ears of corn are emerging from this along the sides,
Hmm.
and each one is shaped like a human head.
Wow.
So yes, to answer your question, yes, I definitely see connections with the thoughts of the Popol Vuh, the council book of the Quiche Maya of Guatemala that we're discussing, and
Wow.
that as you said, in the Popol Vuh myth, there were multiple creations of humanity, and the current one we're in, the humanity was made from white and yellow corn,
Mm.
and we see this interchange of human and maize qualities coming together and we find this in these murals in central Mexico from 1,000 years ago, and there's still ideas of this today. So when in the comunidades, like in the Nahua communities, they would talk about raising the corn as if it were a child, a school child, a
Mm.
schoolboy. So you have to nurture it and give it its appropriate food depending on what stage of the life cycle it's in. When it's young, it can't handle aguardiente or other hard liquor. So you give it, what do kids like? They like cookies, they like chocolate, they like soda. You give them the sweet things that they expect when they are in this juvenile stage. But as they mature toward, like say, as they come closer to the harvest time, that's when they can take on the harder, more adult consumption, such as beer and aguardiente liquor. So and even the tuft of the strands of hair, the filaments at the end of the elote, the maze of
Oh.
ear,
Yeah.
is like the hair of a person, which we see on the Cacasta murals. And I heard similar ideas also expressed in the comunidades in Veracruz. So yes, even in the modern day, there is this symbolic relationship between the nurturing and the upraising of a human child as a model or a metaphor for the raising of the cord in the milpa.
Mm. Wow. And because how do you see it? Do you see it more like just figuratively? Because it's funny, once, I spoke to this shaman from Colombia. She was over here doing ayahuasca ceremonies, and
Oh yeah.
they had flown her over here like to California is where I'm
Mm,
at. And
yeah.
I don't know how it happened, but I ended up picking her brain for like 4 hours straight or something, right? We were just,
Yeah.
and she said that in the future, she's it was gonna be shown that if something in the DNA was gonna show that about the corn, right? I forgot how she worded it, so I don't wanna say it incorrectly, but I remember her saying it very like, without flinching, very like, watch, in the future they're gonna show how. I don't know if I brought it up or why that even came up, but it was interesting. So when you see it in that way, do you think, or from what you've learned, being immersed in that, have you seen it more figuratively, or you do see that they do mean it, like it is what they the belief, right? It is the belief.
Well, I think it's an evolving process, but there is still, I would say that there is still a recognition of the spiritual aspects, that the spirit presence is still very much there.
Hmm.
And the spirit world is still regarded as a reality. And you're speaking of shamans, and I think that's a very important platform to begin from, because the spirit world is one of the defining features of shamanism as a practice. That this reality that we're in, where we are awake and we are communicating with one another, is just one of multiple levels of reality. And these other realms are also populated with different types of beings, such as in the underworld, in the heavens, in other dimensions. And these are all, and these have their own communities of human-like spiritual beings. And the shaman undergoes a trance state, and it can be a different kind. It can be like, as the Colombian example, it could be consuming ayahuasca. In my field work, especially in Cruz Blanca, it can be the consumption of Santa Rosa, which is a hallucinogenic plant that allows the shaman to undergo a trance, or even dreaming. Dreaming is also a very important method for this altered state of awareness that allows the shaman to have an out-of-body experience, that tonal life force that I was talking about earlier, that leaves the body and is conscious, sentient, and is perceptive of the in the other realities, is able to perceive these spiritual beings and engage with them, to make deals with them, to fight them if necessary, or to broker with them. Like, say, if somebody if the community needs healthy land, or if a parent is asking for a healthy son, so the shaman would travel into the spirit worlds in this altered state of consciousness and engage with the spiritual forces in these worlds. So I would say that as part of those practices, it's still very much like taken as a literal reality.
Oh, thank you for that. Absolutely. And where do you think, I didn't want to, because I know you were going in a direction and I kind of just threw you off
Oh,
with
that's
my,
okay. Yeah.
like, there was another thing that popped up right now where you were saying that. Why is it, like how you said earlier, that, certain things were seen as bad? For example, you gave me an example. I forgot which one it was, about how certain things are, or like, for example, the thing with the spirit animals, right? Or certain
Yeah.
things. For example, like, when you said that, like, one of the first animals that came to me, and it started coming to me in dreams, and then I noticed it in real life, like, well, not real life, but in this life, right? This reality
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're in,
Yeah.
um, was the owl, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it would give me answers in my dream, right? I would be like, and I would wake up and I'll be like, oh wow, like, that's it, right? Like a light bulb will go off, because the owl would show me, in the dream state. And it's fun, but that was my thing. Oh, okay, I know what you said about shape shifting. So I
Yeah.
know, to see, like, to natives up here in what is called North America, shape shifting isn't seen as a bad thing. So I didn't know it was seen as a bad, like, it's seen more like, as, I guess, witchcraft or something down there. I had no idea. And
In
even that,
some
right?
areas.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
In some areas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's funny because even that, right? Like, the owl in Mexico isn't considered as much of a bad omen as it is up here,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Although there were cases of it. For example, in the Popol Vuh that we were talking about earlier, there's an episode early on where the lords of Xibalbá, the underworld, send for owls to reach the grandmother of the hero twins,
Oh.
and in order to invite them to play the ball game in the underworld. And
Wow.
these travel through caves. The owl is related to death in the underworld because it is a night creature. It thrives in the darkness, and it's a silent killer. You can barely hear it, so
Mm.
it's like a ghost. It's a pallid with creature that stalks at night. It's a silent and a powerful killer, and it can often have a terrifying and foreboding kind of hoot or a call. It
Mm.
sounds like tecolote.
Oh.
That's where tecolote comes from. It's an onomatopoeia.
Oh, wow.
That's the great horned owl in Mexican Spanish. It comes from tecolot, which is the Nahuatl word for it. Um,
Mm.
but yes, in many parts of the Americas, the owl is an omen of death, because of its association with the worlds of darkness, death, and the underworld. And we see that all the way from as you're saying, from North America all the way to the Maya. In the Popol Vuh. So across the continent, we have uh, legends and beliefs about the owl as a being that thrives in darkness and is deeply connected with death. But this too has like the owl too has a sacred and shamanic ability. Like for example, going back to the Popol Vuh, it's these four owls live in the underworld, and they enter and exit between the worlds, like our world of the living and the world of the dead below, traveling through caves. So this is like shamanism.
Mm.
The ability to cross the world, like crossing over, like between the worlds. So there is so even though we fear these things, they're still a part of nature. They're still a part of our reality. And even though we may not welcome death, it's still that they still have it still has a role to play in
Mm.
the cosmos. So the owl, while it does have a terrible power, it's still a power that is worthy of respect. And I definitely agree that the owl can be a teacher and a messenger if you just know how to listen.
Absolutely. No, and I remember when I tried to, where I was going to sweat ceremony, the elder that would
Mm.
run them, you know, I tried to tell him, I was like, hey, the owl keeps coming to me in dreams. And
Yeah,
he was like, I don't want to hear it. I believe you. He's all, but I just, and I was surprised, I was like, oh, wow, well, who do I talk to? Because
yeah,
obviously I didn't feel I was doing anything wrong because it was coming to me, right? I didn't go
mm,
looking for it. I wasn't like trying to use it in any, because I guess that too, right? There's that stigma of people that try to do bad medicine will also use
yeah,
these kind of
yeah,
animals, right? Like the
yeah.
owl and
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially in the Southwest. I'm sure
Oh.
you're familiar with this with the skinwalkers
Mm.
and related kind of sorcerers and witches from the Diné Navajo or the Hopi. There are many tales and many beliefs about people using the ability to transform into animals for malevolent purposes.
Mm.
So the power itself is not inherently good or bad. It's what people choose to do with it that ultimately decides its impact on the community. So it's just really fascinating the way that you're talking about the owl as a creature that keeps showing up, appearing to you both in the dream world and in this world. That to me, it sounds very much like your Nahuatl.
Oh.
And from my experience and interpretation, I would say that the owl is connecting with you because this is a creature that can see in the dark very
Mm.
well, and so it can travel in places that are otherwise innavigable. It has an insight into traveling places where other people would just be kind of like fumbling around among the
Mm.
trees. The owl sees with clarity and with sharpness, and and
Mm.
and can provide insight in
Mm.
places where others see just the miasma of darkness.
Wow.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, since I know you're the perfect person to ask. But I think, don't they say that the god of the underworld? I don't want to say, because I know I'll slaughter the name. Mika. How do you say it?
Oh, the Mictlān. Yeah. Well, I'm going to get into trouble for this because there are the Tecuhtli is a tricky word to pronounce.
Mm.
And that's the reason why it was often spelled like Chuh. Tecuhtli is the way that you often see spelled in a lot of the colonial writings. But it's that consonant is a single consonant. Tecuhtli is the way that I pronounce it.
Oh.
So Mictlān is the land of the dead. Comes
Mhm.
from Miki, which is to die. Tlān is land of. Tecuhtli is Lord.
Oh,
So he is the Lord in the underworld.
wow.
And but yes, even among the Mexica and many other indigenous traditions, we have a connection between the lords of the underworld, the gods of death, and owls.
Yeah, because
Especially, yeah,
is
especially
it true?
the tecolote.
Is it true that he had like owl feathers? Because that's one of the things that they say, that if you see the old statue, that
Hmm.
there's also owl feathers on his I
There
don't know if it's the
are
headdress or the
I don't think
this.
it's a headdress. In fact, there are like if you look in the codices,
Mm.
there are um, even if you don't see them together, you can see where the owl is a substitute for the presence of the underworld.
Oh.
And we see this, for example, and here again with the Popol Vuh, the lords of Xibalbá are the ones who send the owls from the underworld to the grandmother to invite the spirit, the hero twins to play the ball game. But in Mexica and other Aztec art, we do see a connection between the death between the Lord in the underworld and especially the great horned owl. So we do
Oh.
we do see it, but what I have seen in the Templo Mayor of Tenochtitlan is right next to the cathedral and the National Palace. So it's like it's a 4-block area in the Zócalo in the center of Mexico City. You have the cathedral, you have the city square, you have the National Palace, the Palacio Nacional, the National Palace, and the archaeological site of the Templo Mayor, which has been excavated since the 1970s. I think it was like 1978 when the first excavations began, and
Oh,
they are
wow.
still finding things. They're
Wow.
still finding new buildings, new sculptures. And there's still a lot to explore just underneath that area. And they found two massive, they're at least 7 feet tall. These two massive ceramic sculptures of Mictlāntēcutli, the god of death,
Mm.
and their heads have holes. They're like very like skeleton. They're skull. They're skeletal. And I
Mm.
remember the first time I ever saw one. I saw both of them. There were two of them, and they were both found in the warrior palace or the warrior shrine of the northwest corner of the Templo Mayor. And one of them is in the site museum there by the pyramid, and the other one is in Vienna. They actually brought both of them together for an exhibition. I want to say like 2009 or something like that. It was almost 20 years ago when I first saw them, and I remember walking through this exhibition in the museum that was describing the how like showing photos of how where they were discovered, the pieces that the scattered pieces that they were all kind of like these piles of shards that they had kind of been broken down into, the ability to reconstruct from these pieces it just kind of like, it just got more and more interesting and exciting as I was going through reading these various panels and posters.
Wow.
And even an image of, like they found residue of hematoglobin, of proteins that are found in human blood that
Wow.
suggests that, like just as you see in the codex paintings, pouring blood on top of these statues. We see this in the art, and here we have the archaeological and biological evidence that this was happening. And I was just like, this was getting more and more intense and interesting, and I was all getting all riled up and jacked up. It was like the last panel. I turn around, and behind me, these two spotlights coming down, and the two of them are just leering over, and just kind of like staring down at me with these big skeletal, like the toothy grins and claws. And I jumped when I saw, when I like seen the two of them staring at me with smiling at me. And but one of the things that you notice is that there are holes all around the top of the head. Not just here, but many other places, many other statues have this. And they could have been feathers that were inserted into the holes. So owl feathers could have been placed in here. It's hard to tell though, but there's also like those paintings that show the priests around the statues. We see mats of hair as well. So it could have been like human hair that was all bunched up to create like a wig for the god, for the death god. So I wouldn't rule out the presence of feathers either, because I believe that the Maya were doing something like that as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you studied the Mayan culture just as intensely, or you
No.
focus more on?
Well, traditionally, like historically, my focus has been on the Nahua. Through the field work. I haven't done an archaeological excavation. Archaeology is not my professional background. My work has been mostly with the language and the religion of the contemporary Nahua, but with connection to historical colonial literature and also the pre-Hispanic civilizations, such as the Mexica and the Texcoco and the Xochimilco. And that's something that also needs to be clarified, is that the Mexica were only one nation among the several city-states that in the basin of Mexico. So you had the Acolwa, who included which included the Texcoco city, which was east of the Lake Texcoco. The Mexica were the people of Tenochtitlan, and which was on the island in the lake of Texcoco. And also on the island, the north end of the island, was Tlatelolco. And that's where the famous Tianguis marketplace was. Tlatelolco and Tenochtitlan were together, Mexico. So the Mexica were just the Nahua-speaking people of Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco. The people in the southeast toward Puebla were the Chalca. And to the south of the lake of Texcoco were the Xochimilca. So there were numerous Nahua-speaking nations. And when I talk about them collectively, when I talk about their shared culture, that's when I say Aztec. But when I were to talk specifically about the Aztec nation that inhabited the twin cities of Tlatelolco and Tenochtitlan, then I specify the Mexica nation, which was one of the several around Lake Texcoco. So that has also been a large part of my study. And I do have both, like, say, research experience as well as travel to other parts of Mesoamerica. I've been visiting the Maya area since 1992 was my first visit to the Yucatan Peninsula. So over 30 years, I've been traveling to Maya regions. And in fact, my last one was for the my last visit was in the Day of the Dead week
Oh, wow.
last year. So 2024, I visited the sites of Comalcalco in Tabasco State and Palenque in Chiapas.
Mm,
So now when I visit, I'm thinking much more about what kinds of things do I want to look for here? What kinds of insight and wisdom can are distinct to these cities, and how can I guide the camera and look for the themes and the ideas that I think are the most noteworthy to convert into videos and other contents for the channel. So
absolutely.
yeah, I've had a lifetime interest in the Maya as well, but it wasn't the focus of my academic training, which had more to do with the Nahua communities from the ancient colonial all the way into the modern periods.
Wow. And let me ask you, because yeah, I don't know how much, I don't want to keep you here forever, right? But
Right?
um, I wanted to ask you, like, as far as spirituality, did you just during your academic research, you got pulled into it too? Because it's kind of like it lives in tandem with each other, right? You can't really be immersed in the culture and not see aspects of the spirituality. Or were you experiencing, did you already experience kind of, did you
Yes.
already have oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
and that's why I was so, and that's why I went I went into academics in the first place,
oh,
was
wow.
because I already had these experiences, and
Mm,
I wanted to explore them further, and I wanted to explain to people like these are we've been focused. There's so much focus on on like say rather negative aspects, especially in popular culture. Look at how 2012 was was turned into this kind of like apocalyptic end of the world phenomenon that had nothing to do with how the Maya actually believed in the turning of the cycle. They did not believe in the end of the world. The Mexica definitely believed in the end of the world. That's why
oh,
they,
I didn't know that.
but that's why they like their justification for all the sacrifice was to keep the sun moving in the sky. So
Mm,
that was they had the Mexica kind of motto was save the world by conquering it. That was the Mexica worldview. But the Maya did not believe that the world would end. In fact, speaking of Palenque, which I visited back in November of last year, the most famous king of Palenque was Kinich Hanab Pakal, the first. I think he was the first. And there is a set of hieroglyphs that that list or that describe these cycles of time. There
mm,
are the five most important units of time in the Maya long count calendar, which was separate from the 260-day ritual calendar of the Maya. There were at least three calendar systems among the ancient Maya. There was the 365-day Hab year. There was the 260-day Tzolkin, and there was the 360-day long count, which started with 20 days times 18 units, which was 360. And then every unit after that was a multiple of 20. So 18 times 20, 360. 360 times 20, you have the 360-day tun, the 7,200 and 7,200-day katun, and then 7,200 times 20 was 144,000-day baktun. And these were the
mm,
five main counts. The December 21st, 2012 was the turning of the 13th Baktun. And the Maya did not say that the world would end. It was just the turning of a major 144,000 day cycle, which is about 396 years long. So we are now in the 14th Baktu. These units of time went even further. We don't have the exact names for them, but based on what we know about Mayan linguistics, we can at least have our own working names for these larger units. So there was a unit that was like 2,880,000 days. So we're talking over almost 8,000 year period.
Wow.
That was beyond that. There was the Pictun, there was the Alautun. The king at Palenque, Kinich Hanab Bakal, has a text that says that he will return in the 48th century AD. So over 27 centuries from now.
Wow.
The Maya were predicting that this Maya king would return to Palenque. So the Maya had no point about expecting the world to end anytime soon.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So Palenque was very inspirational, and I actually am looking to return to Yucatan for my next travel, because I mentioned this on my channel that in 2017 my apartment caught fire, and I lost thousands of original photos and videos, including my original photos and videos from my 2008 visit to Yucatan. And I plan to return probably in 2025, probably sometime this year. I plan to return to Yucatan to but not only retake those photos and revisit those Maya sites. I want to revisit Chichen Itza. I want to revisit Tz'ibilchaltun, Uxmal, Abaj, and so on. But I want to do it in a way that I can turn these into videos. So the content is better prepared to share knowledge about these Maya civilizations. So the Maya. So again, it was not my academic fieldwork, but it has been a cornerstone to both my intellectual and my spiritual experiences. So this kind of comes back to your question about why I went into all this in the first place, is because these these ideas that have been kind of turned into, they at least bring attention to these indigenous cultures. So for example, at least like the Mel Gibson movie Apocalypto, I mean, I had a lot of problems with that movie, but at least it got people interested in the Maya. Or the 2012 thing, it really misrepresented the idea, but again, at least people got interested in learning about the Maya, and maybe they might find the reality along the way. I'd say a much more positive and interesting example was Wakanda Forever, the Black Panther movie. I thought it was a far more positive and interesting exploration of like say the survival of a Maya civilization. So I thought that was a much better and much more interesting alternative that was to talk about. So that's why I wanted to teach in the first place, was so to show that these traditions and these experiences are about coming to a deeper understanding of nature and the cosmos and the human role within it. And I felt that a lot of my own dreams and experiences and travels have been along those lines, and I wanted to share this with the world. I first tried to do this through an academic circuit. I became a professor and I taught, but even after I left academics, I still felt the need to continue to work from this principle that these experiences are important, and I think they're messages. And I think that it's my way of sharing these insights from not only the experience, but look at the cultures that have long traditions of explaining and interpreting and embracing such experiences. So I think about my own family history. On my father's side of the family, my father's uncle was one of my father's uncles was Rafael Martin del Campo, who was a professor emeritus at the National Museum. I'm not sorry, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the UNAM, which is one of the premier universities in the country. He was a professor of zoology, but his expertise was in Nahuatl and what we call ethnozoology. That is the study of, let's say, how do cultures understand the animal world?
Wow.
So he specialized in identifying the species of different animals, especially birds and reptiles. He was kind of like specifically a herpetologist, but if you go to Nahuatl dictionaries, you can see Martin del Campo showing up a lot because, like, if you look for animals, because he is one of the primary sources for identifying different genera and species of birds, reptiles, amphibians, and I think even other mammals, but especially birds and reptiles. By looking at the descriptions and the Nahuatl meanings of the terms that were volunteered by the Mexica. So on my father's side of the family, I have that academic background. On my mother's side of the family, my mother's father was Cora from the region between southern Nayarit and northwest Jalisco. And we know that he performed shamanic, like say, in ceremonies for the members of my mother's generation. And we're pretty sure that his father was a curandero or a shaman among the Cora, who are closely related to the Huichol. The Huichol are very famous for their consumption of peyote, for their pilgrimages, for their intricate mythology. The Cora are very related, but at the same time, it's a very distinct culture. But linguistically, geographically, genetically, the Cora and the Huichol, or to use their own terms, the Nayarit, that's the Cora name for themselves, and the Wisharika, which is how the Huichol call themselves. These are their own names, but they are, again, genetically, geographically, and linguistically close like crossed fingers. They're very closely related. So I do see a lot of overlap. I do see a lot of shared culture between these two, but dreaming is a very important experience of the sacred and the spirit worlds among the Cora. And there's a lineage on my mother's side of the family along this practice. And there are probably some others that I'm also looking to explore. I have actually, just 2 nights ago, I finally found the PDF of an article that was published by Konrad Theodor Preuss back in 1934. It is written in German, but fortunately I can read enough German to follow. It is a grammar of the Cora language. And this is, to my knowledge, the only complete, comprehensive grammar of the Cora or the Nayarit language that I've found. So this is going to be one of my next steps in exploring more about that part of my ancestry. And learning more about, kind of like what I was doing in Veracruz, learning about the spiritual beliefs and ideas by understanding the language, the categories, the discourses, the conversations they have around these ideas, the terms that they use to talk about these categories. That's one of my next steps with the Nayarit language, with my own ancestry, is doing that, a very similar approach by looking at the grammar and the vocabulary through through the publications. And again, it's unfortunate that some of our most important sources are very inaccessible. You have to pay for a subscription to, say, an anthropology database to download these PDFs. And even when you can get them, you also have to know how to read German. So what I want to do is see if there are ways that here too I can take this esoteric knowledge and turn it into something that is accessible for a wider community. So so where I am then is I'm at this this junction, this meeting point between the academic background on my father's side and the academic study of these indigenous Mexican cultures on my father's side, and then the lived experience from my mother's side. And that's where I think they come together in my generation.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I did want to ask you, if you don't mind, what's one, like a spiritual experience that you had that really was like, wow, this is something that was unbelievable or life-changing, or did you ever have an experience that, I mean, because like how you said that it was your spiritual walk that kind of led you on the path you're on. So is there one that jumps out to you, something you experienced?
Well, I feel like there are different, it depends where I go. And as I've talked about this in a couple of my videos on my channel, is that I try to like, it's not in a sense, I don't really try to look for this one moment of intense beauty and presence that often makes me break down into tears. That I'm in this time and place to experience this unique moment that reminds me of where I am in the world and what I am here to learn. And it does come usually once with every week-long travel that I take. So my most recent ones, I had two of these last year, for example, in 2024. When I was in Colombia, for example, and in Leticia, which is the southernmost tip of Colombia. This is in the Amazon. It is at the triple border of Colombia, Peru, and Brazil.
Wow.
And there is a park in the city center that has a variety of rainforest gardens surrounding it. There are these massive trees. There is there's a pool of water lilies. There is a central pool that is like overgrown with these tall herbs and grasses and other plants that are growing up. And it was just after dusk, so nighttime had just come, and all the frogs started singing inside in the little pool. I couldn't see them, but I could just listen to their collective voice, and that was so beautiful. I broke down into tears.
Oh,
Just like as I said in one of my videos, it was listening to the voice and the soul of the rainforest there at that moment for me. As an example, when I was in Mexico for the Days of the Dead between October and November of 2024. I spent a weekend in Mexico City right before going to Tabasco to see the Olmec and the Maya sites. And at the National Museum of Anthropology, the ethnology hall had been completely redone. It was just last year, just in 2024. They reopened a new incarnation of the modern indigenous cultures of Mexico. And a lot of pieces that I've been seeing for years in their own respective halls have been in new displays with new commentary. And there was a Cora mask with feathers and flowery decorations that I'd always seen in passing, but now had to finally had an explanation for it. And I understood that this was for rainmaking ceremonies. And that was my moment there, that I was there to see this thing and to learn from this. This is part of my ancestry, and I have a better understanding of the belief that wearing the mask is not just about pretending to be something else. It is about becoming that thing And this is a very common Native American concept that we find all the way from the Inuit to the Andes. The idea that the mask is a tool of transformation and becoming. And seeing that, an example of that from my own ancestry was my breakdown moment from the Mexico trip.
Wow.
In 2023, I went to New Mexico, and I stood in the great kiva of like the round house, which is used for the Pueblo ceremonies among the natives of New Mexico. And standing in that space was my breakdown moment. That here was this unique experience, and thinking about the ceremonies and the view of the cosmos as per the intentions of the construction of this ceremonial kiva building. Wow. So I would say that, or another time, sitting on the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan was another such moment for me. So I would say that usually once per travel, I even though I kind of look for it, I just let it come when it does. Kind of expect the unexpected, understand it when it happens, and find the insight and reflect on the experience after it happens. So I would say that just kind of being in these very important places and having a different kind of experience, but still there's this commonality of kind of understanding that where you are is a unique moment in space and time, and it may be a lesson to be learned from it that isn't just like an intellectual absorption, but something that has to be felt with the whole body.
Wow. No, that I couldn't have asked for a better, more perfect answer than that. That was yeah, no, thank you so much. Well, yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. I would love to have another conversation with you and have you back on. I feel like there's so many other things I want to ask you, but I know that we'll just go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So
there was one thing I promised I would talk about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please do.
One of my last things I wanted to say was kind of going back to the very beginning of our talk when we were discussing the New Year ceremony. One last thing I wanted to say was those chicken offerings and the muñequitos, the little paper figurines, and scattering the blood on top of it was a firma. It's a signature. It was the signing of a contract between the human and the spirit worlds that to formalize the expected exchanges, that expected reciprocity that I was talking about earlier. This was, in a sense, like signing the contract between with chicken blood on this paper surface of figures. That was a way of formalizing the relationship that was expected between the human and the spirit worlds. So this was kind of like the punchline of the entire kind of story about the New Year ceremonies as an illustration of these larger ideas of the Mesoamerican world. And even for your audiences that may be familiar with other indigenous traditions in North America, in Colombia, other parts of South America, I invite the audience to think about anything that I've said here before. Does this remind you of things from your traditions that you may have either grown up with or other traditions that may interest you? They could be the Inuit, they could be the Cherokee, they could be the Pueblo peoples, the native peoples of California, the indigenous peoples of the Amazon, the Maya, the Inca. If there are other traditions, I encourage you to reflect on the similarities, the overlaps with the kinds of insights and ideas that I know most especially from these Mesoamerican principles, which again, I can break down into three main ideas: that the universe is alive, it is dual, and it is reciprocal. So those were, and these I think should have guided not only the ways that I make videos, but also the ways in which I also think about my role, my engagement with the world around me, like the human world, the spirit world, the cosmic worlds, and how we can do these in healthy and responsible and sustainable manners that are respectful to the human, to our fellow humans, respectful to the spirits and the gods that we also share the world with.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And so, well, since you brought that up, let me ask you. So obviously, when you witness this, like the signing of the contract, in that culture, it's not seen as a bad thing. So why is there similarities to like the idea of signing, signing your soul to the devil kind of thing, and like what?
Oh, yes. Definitely not. And in fact, I'm very glad that you asked this question, because this is one of the fundamental differences between Western, let's say European Christianity, and indigenous spirituality, in that Western Christianity has for centuries focused on the individual. It is individual will, individual salvation. Even if they're predestined to be saved or damned, that is still an individual level. Mesoamerican and other indigenous traditions, the emphasis is on the communal welfare. It is about, like say, if you look at what these ceremonies are about, it is not just about the health of the family, but because this is being done at the mountains and other sacred sites around the village, this is not like other participants, neighbors are going to come in, they'll bring money, they'll help to pay for the ritual supplies, they'll pay for transportation, they'll help finance other parts of these ceremonies. So it is not simply for the welfare and the health of one particular family, but this is the community, the people from various houses across the village. They could even come from neighboring villages. They'll all come in as well. And they are contributing their finances, they're giving their time, their energy, their enthusiasm for a collective communal ritual. This is to pray for rains that are not just for one milpa, but for all the milpas in the community. This is so the priority is the health, the welfare, the survival at the communal level. This is the human community engaging with the spirit community. And that is the kind of the terms of the contract, is a contract between the human villages, the human community, and the spirit worlds as collectively as well. So, and I was kind of looking at some of my notes recently from my research on this subject, and and it reminded me that it doesn't even have to be about just this region of the Huasteca, just like the Nahua villages around the mountain, but these rituals like this can also be extended as the wealth, the abundance, the fertility, the healthy and abundant food for everybody worldwide. So some curanderos, some of these specialists have a global view that they're acting locally, thinking globally when in terms of how they're doing. And I also saw this in the Amazon as well, like in Colombia. The shamans who are again they're acting locally, but they're thinking globally. They know that their rituals are just a contribution. But I would also kind of would like to have the audience to think about, like say, little things that collectively together can build up to a bigger movement. And I think that's what shamans and curanderos and other ritual specialists across the Americas are kind of waking up to, that even though they're kind of working at these local levels, they can still think about how their individual actions are gradually, collectively building towards something that includes all of us.
Absolutely. No, that's beautifully put. Wow. Yeah, because I don't want to keep prolonging it, but like, why do you think? I mean, obviously, right, with religion and everything, it was forced on the people, right? But why do you think it has had, for example, me, once I started experiencing spiritual things that were unexplainable, like the chain kind of fell off because like, I couldn't really be, the fear tactics didn't work, nothing, because all this was happening naturally, right? I wasn't, even though now, yeah, having immersed myself in a native community, and then I started going to ceremonies, obviously doing rituals and this and that. But before that, there were no rituals involved, nothing. So everything was coming to me naturally. Um, so that kind of all faded away, you know. I mean, but I remember even I had to force myself to not do this when I would cross in front of a church. You know, it was the, I guess the brainwashing, for lack of a better word, was that strong, right? The fear, like, oh no, if I don't do this, like my house is gonna burn down or something. I mean, I'm sorry that I know that actually, but you know, stuff like that, right? Like, so why do you think that it's still that difficult to shake? Because when I started talking to friends and this and that about that, you know, right away it was like, oh, the native ceremonies, that's witchcraft or this and that. Why do you think it's had such a lasting impact and it's still so hard? Is it just that, all the traumas, or?
Yeah, it's still that kind, those kinds of assumptions are still being handed down,
Mm,
but it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, what's happening now, because at the same time, while in the United States there is a more of a kind of like a reconnection with these experiences and with these traditions. However, in many other parts of Latin America, there is kind of like the opposite is happening, where you have missionaries going to these native communities, and they are abandoning their traditions, and kind of like the things that we find valuable and are worth reclaiming are being rejected in the places where we would expect to find them, or where the places where
wow.
we're trying to learn from are the places that are often the place where they are most actively trying to abandon it. But
Wow.
I think that the fact that that experience that this is something that, as I mentioned before, there are things, there are aspects of native ritual and spirituality that you can learn through books and through conversations, but if you have it for yourself, then it's a different register. And my lifetime has been kind of like looking for the complementarities of the two, to both study but also practice
Mm,
these traditions, and find out the ways that to bring these two in into, like, say, a healthy complements, because then I can go back to my resources, my literature, and point out, okay, like, say, this was inspired by these particular practices and experiences of, say, the Nayarit tradition, for example. Um, but I'd also say that there is a place where the two can find complementarity. And that's something that I also found in the Comunidades. And that's why the book I wrote, The Shaman's Cross, got its name, was because the point of the title was that even though if you look at the surface, like you visit these Comunidades and you see the altars, and they have images of the angels, the saints, the virgins, the crosses, and you would think that this is a Christian altar. But if you look at what they're actually doing in practice, the priorities of their rituals, it is still underlyingly indigenous,
mm.
and in many cases reflects shamanic beliefs and practices. So that's why I chose that title. And so I know that a lot of people want to say decolonize, get rid of all the Christianity, but you don't have to do that. If you look at how people actually practice, and you look at the the rituals and the worldview that they embrace, that they hand down the generations, you can see that living native tradition is still there. In some cases, they just covered it up with Christianity so that they could kind of practice under the guise of pretending to be Christian. And there were many native cultures in the colonial period where they were doing that. But today, there's a kind of like a complementarity of the two, that duality again. Instead of seeing like binary opposites, they see a spectrum and ways to bring both sides together into something that is productive and healthy.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And, you reminded me the first time I went to the first spring ceremony, right? Like Mexica spring ceremony that I went to. I remember I was confused because I was barely like trying to reconnect with my culture, right? And I remember going to this, it was a 2-day ceremony. And I remember, that there were 3 groups, and someone explained to me, and I asked, I was asking everyone questions, and I was just picking everyone's brain. I'm like, why is there, so many of them have like the Virgin Mary and Jesus and this and that. And he explained to me, well, he said, well, there's like 3 groups, right? There's the ones that are going all the way back to the culture, the ones that are like in the middle, right? And then there's the ones that use a lot of heavy, like Christian symbolism, right? Virgin Mary, Jesus. Because there was even like a little Jesus in the middle dressed up like a Aztec dancer, right? So all this, but once he explained that, I mean, I got it. At first, I was confused because I was just trying to find my way back, right? I was barely, so I was confused. I didn't know how to feel about it, right? Now it doesn't bother me at all. It is what it is. Like you said, I like how you put it. It's nice to the duality, right? To embrace different things, So absolutely. So yeah, I think on that note, if you want to just let everybody know where they can contact you, where your website.
You can find me at edgarmartindelcampo.com. And you can also find me at the Eye of the Serpent channel has several platforms. You can, for example, Eye of the Serpent is on Instagram, Red Note, TikTok, and most importantly, YouTube. YouTube is my primary platform. That's where I'm the most active, and that's where I have the most activity. So that's those. So I'd say edgarmartindelcampo.com and the YouTube Eye of the Serpent channel. And Eye of the Serpent channel is all one word. There are no spaces or underscores or hyphens. It's just one single like string of words.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. And your book, where can they find your book on your website?
It's on Amazon Kindle, and there are a few hard copies left on my Etsy page.
Okay.
So if you look for the Shaman's Cross on Etsy or in Amazon, and you'll see my name, Edgar Martin del Campo. It's not to be confused with Shaman's Crossing, which is another book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not mine.
No, thank you so much. It's an honor. I learned so much. I know there's so much more to learn. And I would definitely recommend to anybody to follow you on your YouTube page. I've learned just from your YouTube page. Obviously, that's why we're here right now. So, Edgar, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It was an honor. Thank you.
Life may move fast, or it may move slow. I met a silly man who said he make it slow. We look up out towards space, or even at the sky. One that pass away, but never look inside. Breathe in, breathe out. Life is a maze, but we'll figure this out. I mean, human beings, I ain't got no doubt.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I want to feel this way forever.